Okay, are we ready?
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last day of MMS. My name is Doug Height. I'm an operations engineer with the Cloud and Data Center Management team. With me today is Christina.
Hi, Christina Ashmit. I'm a senior program manager in our enterprise client development tools team. So we develop tools for our operational groups that run Intune and some other online services.
Yep. And I manage a Tier 1 help desk, and I work on the monitoring and management team. And we also have a Tier 2, Tier 3 monitoring team. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a data warehouse we built on top of the Operations Manager data, particularly all the alerts that come through Operations Manager into Service Manager. So what is Cloud Data Center Management? We're part of Server and Tools. We support about 10,000 different servers, over 150 different domains from Microsoft.com to Windows Update, MSDN, and TechNet. We have 2 help desks, an infrastructure help desk that manages all the Operations Manager alerts, as well as an application help desk that deals with emails and phone calls. And we're going to talk today about a data warehouse that we built on top of Operations Manager and all the data that we get into Service Manager, as well as some of the Config Manager data that we pull in as well. And we're using this data to measure and monitor our Tier 1 help desk. So we want to discuss some of the challenges facing IT operations today, particularly all of the alerts that come from all the different monitoring systems. I'm hearing feedback, so I'll stack back over here. Particularly all of the data that's coming in from your Operations Manager environment, from all the management packs, all those alerts, all that data. And we're going to talk today about how we've taken that data and built a useful cube to pull out some actionable reports, as well as some data around forecasting, problem management, and particularly measuring SLA, as well as fine-tuning our management packs. Some of the takeaways from this session, we hope to cover how do we leverage the out-of-box cube in reporting from Operations Manager, and how we use that data to improve our Service Manager. Sorry? Speak up? Okay. That's giving too much feedback there. So, first what we wanted to do is identify some problems we wanted to solve. One of the problems we have with all the data we have coming in is how do we measure our SLA commitments? We want to make sure that our commitments to all the business units, the Microsoft.coms, Windows Updates, MSDN, and TechNets, that the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 teams are meeting their SLAs, as well as look for areas of improvement within all of this data that we're receiving at our Tier 1 help desk. Another one of the goals that we had is we wanted to measure the individual performance as well. So we have all those alerts coming into our Tier 1 help desk. How do we measure the individual performance? With 10,000 servers, we have a huge data set of alerting data coming into our systems. We also wanted to take a look at how can we use all of this data to improve our costs, our cost effectiveness, where are the opportunities for improving our costs, reducing costs. And then we'll talk a little bit about forecasting and capacity planning. How can we use this data to go ahead and look forward towards forecasting? What does this data tell us about our environment? Where do we need to grow our environment? What do our partners need to grow their environment? Not only from a monitoring standpoint, but just from an operational standpoint of do they need to add more servers for capacity planning or forecasting? So we have 2 help desks. We have an infrastructure help desk, and that's what we're going to focus primarily on today, is all the operational alerts coming from our monitoring environments. We do have an application help desk, so all the metrics that we have today do apply to both help desks, but the application help desk is more email end-user created tickets, so that's easier to manage. The goal today is to discuss how we can improve all these management packs, all this alert data that's coming in to Operations Manager and Service Manager. And so when we started looking at all this data and defining the metrics, you'll see that this maps nicely to IDLE. First thing we did is define 12 metrics. Obviously you want to take a look at your total ticketing, all the IRs, all the SRs coming into your ticketing system. And we broke out the total into 2 areas, whether they escalated something within SLA or they escalated something out of SLA, the good and the bad. At Tier 1, we have a 15-minute SLA. So from the time an alert is generated and gets into our Tier 1 ticketing queue and Service Manager, my help desk has 15 minutes to TSG, research it, log on to servers, do some remediation, code the Service Manager ticket, as well as call the Tier 2 and Tier 3 engineers 24/7 around the world and escalate that issue to them. So that's a very tight window. 15 minutes is not a lot of time to do all of that work. So what we wanted to do is to measure that commitment to our customers and to take a look at all of the team members across both, we have a team in Hyderabad as well as here in Redmond, to take a look at those teams to see how is our operational efficiency working. These are pretty standard metrics. First touch resolution, where they closed their tickets within their 15-minute SLA at Tier 1. Do they have to escalate those tickets? Some of this stuff is just normal SLA metrics. The key to all of our reporting is the actionable. You see under total SLA, actionable, we call it worked or billed, or the non-actionable. This is the key metric to all of our reporting. This is how we've cleaned up our monitoring systems, how we've improved our operational efficiency, as well as cleaning up our management packs. We used to have something called DLL hell years ago. I like to call our new thing here MP hell. If you've ever had to deal with management packs and a lot of that data coming in there, is how do you fine-tune your management packs? How do you give actionable reports to your engineering teams so they can go back to the management packs, clean them up, fine-tune the monitors, remove some of the alerting? This is the key metric to all of our data in our data warehouse. And so what happens at Tier 1 is when we do call and escalate a ticket to our Tier 2 and Tier 3 engineering teams, when we code these tickets, we code a little flag that says actionable or non-actionable. So how do you know if it's actionable or non-actionable? Well, when we call you as an engineer at 2 in the morning and we escalate an issue to you, since you routed that alert to our team, we assume it's important enough for us to call you. And so if we call you or call Christina at 3 in the morning and we say we have an escalation for you, and she says, you know what, I'm tired, don't bother me. I'm going back to sleep, just close the ticket, route it to my queue, send me an email. We quietly just close that as non-actionable so that later on we can run some reports to see what is actually being escalated that is of value to our Tier 2 and Tier 3 engineers. If it's not actionable, we have a problem management team is going to follow up with you. So today what we're going to talk about is how we use these actionable versus non-actionable alerts to clean up our management packs and to look at some of the data in the data warehouse. So one of the metrics that we were looking at is the Tier 1 help desk team performance. So we knew that taking a look at your whole Tier 1 help desk or your Tier 2 or Tier 3 monitoring teams, everything starts with the individual. We defined the base metrics that we talked about earlier, the 12 key metrics, and we started measuring the individual performance. Because we know that's where all of our SLAs, all of our in or out of SLA commitment goals are mapped back to the individual performance. So what we started doing is taking a look at just the total first touch resolution that was resolved by the engineers in Tier 1, the number of volume of tickets they're working, whether it's in SLA or out of SLA. And we knew that we've taken the individual, we can start building the shift, the prime shift, on-site in Hyderabad, or in Redmond, and take a look at which team or what shift is actually either driving up or driving down our SLA. We can also take a look at the cost, the financial impact as well. So out of these thousands of alerts we're getting, if we take the look at our Tier 1 cost and align that with either a shift or the individual, we can see what the value is that they're providing, how many tickets they're working. Are they driving down our SLA and not working hardly any tickets? What does that cost? So it gives us a really good way to measure our team's performance as well. And starting at that base layer, that individual, we can build the shift, the team, the day, the month, the week, and take a look at how well we're actually running our help desk. The added benefit to that is also we can align that with the properties like Microsoft.com, download.microsoft.com, take a look at that same data that we use to measure our Tier 1 help desk and align the property or the business group's data with that same data and identify which systems are the top alert generators. We can take a look at Microsoft.com and say that our Bay Area data center particular cluster is very noisy, very verbose. We can align that cost with our Tier 1 team to see how we can actually improve the management packs from those systems. We also have a problem management team. I'm just going to move this up a bit. We also have a problem management team that regularly looks through all of these reports and works back with the engineers to help fine-tune their management packs as well as clean up all these non-actionable alerts. One of the reports that we like to look at, we call it the MP to IR report. So it's not only useful to take a look at the individual's metrics and see how many tickets they're working and is it in SLA or out of SLA. We can actually go along and align all the servers and take a look of what servers are alerting and map all that data back to the management pack. Now this is where it gets good. Measuring Tier 1, that's exciting, and everybody's happy about that. But it's when you start getting into the management packs and aligning all that data that's coming from all these systems, all the tickets that we're escalating 24/7, back to a management pack. Now these are useful reports because then we can go back to the engineers who are busy deploying, maintaining their systems, their meetings. They don't have time to go dig through all these alerts. So this is something that we provide to them. In this particular report, I pulled out a single server. It's a 30-day view, a full month. And one of the alerts threw over 2,000 alerts in 1 month. Same event ID 100, same server, month after month. So once we deployed this report, we started looking at this data and go, this is terrible. What we're doing is actually calling an engineer hundreds and hundreds, if not a couple thousand times a month, escalating the same issue that they're now saying, it's not actionable. Just send me an email, just close the ticket. That's a lot of work at a tier 1 to sit there every 15 minutes and go through these alerts. So by pulling these reports, we can actually go back to the engineer and say, if this isn't useful, why don't we just route it automatically to your queue? Why do we have to go through a tier 1 help desk? Can we get rid of this alert? Can you even just fix the problem so the alert goes away? So it provides some really good trending data. There's no more hunting through your management packs to try to correlate the thousands of alerts. And we have a lot of management packs. We have, I believe, 9 dedicated monitoring instances now where the customers like Microsoft.com define their management packs for their systems. And we have a shared monitoring system where the base OS, base SQL management packs are deployed. I'm going to hand it over here to Christina for a moment. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the cube, how we designed the cube, some of the calculations, and some of the out-of-box Service Manager cube that we deployed, and some of the lessons learned.
What I was going to talk about is just sort of from a technical perspective. I was in charge of the dev team, the BI dev team that developed the cube, and we built several ETLs and one database with a cube in it. And we had a couple of requirements from Doug. He went through the key metrics that he has there. Those are the requirements that he gave us. And one of the reasons we decided to build a custom cube is because we had some limitations in Service Manager, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. First was usability. When we got the Service Manager data warehouse out of the box and you plug Excel up to it and connect to the cube and you look at it, there's a lot of stuff in there. And from a business user perspective, they weren't sure what to do with that data. You know, if you want to run a report and say, well, how many incidents were escalated? It was really challenging for them to know which dimension to choose, which measure to apply. And there was a lot of information in there, and it just caused a lot of churn, a lot of questions. People were complaining, I don't know what to do with this report. So some people that are really comfortable in those environments and Excel and can do all that didn't have a problem, but the average business user was really intimidated by it. So we wanted to solve that problem since we're going to go through this effort anyway. The other challenge, or really from the dev perspective, that was the biggest challenge we had was the granularity of the data. So Doug is talking about sort of the business of running the help desk and escalating and finding, the churn or the noise in the management packs. And it was hard for us to figure out from billing. This granular data is around historical. So you go to the data warehouse and you want to know the life of any ticket, right? So the ticket was created, it was assigned to this person, and then it moved over here, and then it changed priority, and then it went over here. And so when you build your reports, you have business rules around how you charge, how the help desk charge you tier 1, you charge for tier 1. And we were missing data. In the first out-of-box, people would run a report, and they'd say, no, that's not right. And they'd run a query against SQL, and it would give them a different result than if they run the query against the data warehouse. And so when we started looking into it, realized that in Service Manager, there's a 5-minute ETL that takes data out of the live database and puts it into the data warehouse. And the way the data is structured is this one record per incident, right? So, and in that record, it has all the fields for that incident. And every 5 minutes, they're just updated. So for instance, if it comes in and it's assigned to tier 1, say, and then 5 minutes later it's assigned to tier 2, when you pull the data out of the cube, you will see that the tier that it's in is tier 2. That's what it's in right now. But you missed that it used to be in tier 1, and we needed to know that. In order to bill or do first touch resolution, I needed to know who touched it first, who classified it, and where did it go, how long was it in any queue, and that information was missing. So that's really one of the challenges we wanted to build this cube for. So we build an ETL that goes into the Service Manager database, the live data, that runs through all the logs. It basically goes through the change log and the create log for each ticket. And it basically builds a step table, and it says, okay, so this is null, this is when it was created, or change ID 0, this is when this ticket was created, this is when it was assigned a queue, and we record that and we look at how long it took. And then we say, okay, it was in this queue, and then it's in this queue, and that was so long, and we calculate the minutes and stuff, so that we can build this history of any incident and follow it through its life cycle and build reports that say, Tier 1 had it for 5 minutes, they sent it to Tier 2, Tier 2 said, no, it's really your issue, they sent it back to Tier 1, and all that stuff that happens in managing incidents. So we were able to build a nice, clear picture about that. And then we can get trending data and so on and so forth. So that was our challenge around historical data. And then sort of a lot of what Doug was touching on, incidents in Service Manager that are created by Ops Manager alerts are not necessarily easy to tie back to each other. So if you have the OM connector for Service Manager on and every alert fires is going to create an incident in Service Manager. But when you get the incident, you don't know that much about that alert, right? You don't know which rule and which management pack is creating it. So we wanted to try to figure out how do we easily map this thing in OM is causing this incident in Service Manager. And then, of course, the calculations, kind of touched on. We have custom calculations for SLA, for escalations, for first touch resolution. So when we do billing for Tier 1, we needed to know or be able to control what calculation was being applied to the data. So, wrong button. Wrong computer. All right, so this is what we have. So first of all, you have the DW Data Mart. That's the Service Manager Data Warehouse, right? Then you have the Service Manager database, or the production database, where all the data is live and being stored and updated. And then you have the Operations Manager database. And this is not their data warehouse. This is their live database, where all the alert data is. And then so we built the size. This is not to scale. Ours is much smaller. But basically, we build our own custom database. We reference views. I guess I could build up a slide. So we reference views from the Service Manager data warehouse. One of the things we didn't want to do is move too much data around. And a lot of the ETLs we have are not about shipping data, but about building new data that gives us a historical step change log. And so the we ETL data from Service Manager, and we ETL data from Ops Manager to solve those two problems we talked about. So we have a couple new tables and so on. So that's sort of what the infrastructure looks like. From usability, this is just a slide that talks about when we built the new cube, we really had Tier 1 reporting for the most part in mind, because the business users we had were really trying to manage either their help desk or their escalation process or their overall costs and managing and operating the infrastructure. So we decided to, in the cube, just to expose, in the new cube, just the things that you cared about. And we have one measure, and I don't know, 20 dimensions, basically. So we took the total views that we put into our cube that we leverage from Service Manager of 72. So there's 160 views out of the box in Service Manager, and we leverage only 72. And in a lot of places, we combined views together so that we didn't have to have separate dimensions, so that people could just have one dimension and see multiple things that related to each other. And like I said, we didn't want to move a lot of data around, so we kind of tried to reference what was already there. So I have this in a screenshot because it's really hard to show you in SQL what it is, but this is sort of some of the processing that happens. And so what we're doing here is first thing we want to know is when was the incident created? This data, we need to know when the alert fired. When did the incident get created in Service Manager? And we need to know when it's created in Service Manager so that we can say, once the ticket is created, then we're going to measure the help desk. And so when we first started, we thought, okay, the post-create date must be the create date. We had two create dates. We're like, well, when is the incident created? And so when we did our first version of this, we started with post-create date. And we said, okay, well, if this incident is created at this time, then we look for the next queue that's assigned. And we say, well, that's how long it took for Tier 1 to pick up the ticket. Service Manager created the ticket, Tier 1 found it or saw it, and then did something about it. And so we call that our response time. And when we were digging into it, we realized that that's actually not the one you want. You want the pre-create date, because the pre-create date is the date that it gets created. Oh, I'm doing it backwards. Sorry. The pre-create date is the date that it gets created in OM, and the post-create date is the date it gets created in Service Manager. So an accident, we didn't realize we were doing this. We just noticed we had two dates, and we needed to pick one. if you measure the pre-create date and the post-create date, that gives you your latency. So you can measure latency between OM alert generation to the time that it gets created in Service Manager. And I think we have tens of thousands of tickets a month. Our latency is very, 5% of them might have a 2-minute latency or more. Most of them are within seconds. And a lot of times they're pretty much the same time. But it does give you an opportunity to investigate what those areas are. And then this is what we're really looking for, the fact that it's null and now it's not null. And then that's how we start to say, okay, this is the queue, this is not assigned a queue, now it is assigned a queue, and then the same base managed identity now gets assigned, it's that queue, and now it gets assigned another queue, and so we're building these tables in the staging database. And so this is what it looks like when we're done. This is what we're trying to build. It was in this queue, it went start time, so it's in this tier queue, then it was in this next tier queue, it started here and it ended here, and then I can build how many minutes in each queue, and I can get a nice report around where this incident moved around. All right, so let's look at some of that. It's a very riveting demo because it's SQL. All right, so the first thing I wanted to show you is this is just the connecting to the cube in Excel, so you can just see some of the dimensions and measures that you get to choose from. So this is sort of our new cube. You can see we have one measure at the top for incidents. And when I expand it, you'll see that this is basically the requirements that Doug gave us. These are all the calculations that they want to apply to the incidents that they have. And then we have all of the different fields that you can choose from. It's a relatively short list. You can choose, it's pretty simple from a business user to say, oh, I want to know about classification and I want to know incidents that were escalated. Boom, they're done. So if we look at what you get out of the box, these are all the dimensions that you get out of the box. And so, I'm still scrolling, right? There's entirely too many. People were like, so you get the dimensions, you get the measures, and then we haven't got to dimensions yet. Now we get to dimensions. And so you have things that repeat a lot, incidents here, status here, classification here and there. And so they were like, I don't know what to do with that. So that's one of the ways, one of the goals we had was usability. All right. So here, this is my dev environment that you're looking at, the SQL Server. One of the things I wanted to show was, so here we have the Service Manager, DW Data Mart, all of the out-of-the-box stuff that you get here, a bunch of tables. This is our, MPSD Data Mart. This is the one that we created. It's basically 1/4 of the size of the Service Manager Data Warehouse. And then just show you a couple of things here. So when we scroll down, so we created a couple of tables in staging where we get the tier queue change, the create log, the change log for priority and classification. And then some of these other tables you'll see here around alert, base managed identity, management type, management pack, monitor rules, that is for OM data. And that's just a straight transfer of data. And so if you see in here, I think this one is the classification change log. So here you have the change type 0, so that means it was new, it's created. You can see that the pre-tier queue is null, and then the post-tier queue is filled in. And in this table, we are actually calculating, this is not the one, this is classification. Where's my change? We'll just write to it, we'll just get it. Create log. Oh, bastard. Demo gods. Oh, yay. Could have been worse. All right. So here you can see we're calculating the minutes in the tier queue. So just taking each one, and for every entry, we're calculating the minutes. That's what I want to show you there. That's really not that exciting, actually. But and then before I leave the demo, I wanted to show this, because we're going to talk about it next. This is the factless fact table that gives us the OM data. So what we do is we just basically transfer all of these tables from OM into SM, and then we join them together so that we can get a nice view of the incident. And so we get the incident, we'll know right down to the rule that fired, that's part of the monitor, that's part of the management pack, that's deployed on the server, this is the thing that's causing the alert. And that allows Doug's team to do their problem management. So that's kind of what it looks like in SQL. All right. I'm going to show you what it looks like in PowerPoint. There you go. So basically, this is the ETL. This is the steps in the ETL we built to do that, solve that problem. So first, you do setup and auditing. We retrieve a server list. So in the service that Doug runs, they have multiple OM instances and one service manager, a shared service manager instance. So we wanted to build in the capability to know, to connect to all the OM servers, because all of the incidents from all of the different groups are in the same service manager data warehouse. So basically, we have a configuration table where we retrieve the server list, and then we make connections to each of the OM servers, and we basically copy over the 6 tables that are there. We copy those tables over as is. And then we run analysis on those tables and join it with the incident data that we have in Service Manager to give him the MP to IR report that you'll see. Oh, actually, I guess you already showed it. So again, here, this is just another way to show that. This is the factless fact table. There's no calculations applied. We're just trying to tie the relationships together here. We just want to know all of the pieces. Because, in OM, it's hard to know where you put the setting that's firing, the alert. So then just finally, what do we get in the cube? We did the V1 cube, where we use the custom tool, not the custom tools, we use the out-of-box tools for Service Manager. And Doug's going to show you next sort of some of the gains we got for that when we had the poor usability and some of the problems that we had mentioned. But we were still able to get good data out of the system, enough to be actionable, make changes. But really, the reason why we built a custom cube was about calculations. So we needed to know specifically what the calculations that were being applied to, say, escalations or first touch resolution in SLA, out of SLA. And we also wanted to be able to change those calculations if the business changed. So that's why we created the cube, and this is sort of what it looks like conceptually. And you'll see that in the measure that you show up in the report, when you look at Excel, that table, the blue and orange table, is exactly what's in there, right? Those are the measurements, those are the business rules that we want to measure. And they show up really easily in Excel, and so it makes them much more usable. And the other thing that we wanted to build a cube for is because we wanted incidents to be the grain or the thing we wanted to aggregate across. We want to measure things at the incident level. How many incidents? Had this happen or that happen, or were it fall in this category or belong to this group? That was the grain that we wanted to measure. And then the other thing is there's drill through for that. So if I get a list of incidents that say these are all my incidents that are in SLA, and I could double click in Excel and I get what they are. There's 32 that are in SLA. Well, which ones are they? And you double click and then you can get that details out. So that's sort of what we did there. Okay, just quick, some lessons learned. We started the project after, like I say, we had the out-of-box cube running for a while, a couple of months. Some of the things we learned is that we had it all, SRs and IRs were all in the same cube out-of-box, and we decided to separate them. We run the businesses separately. Like Doug was saying, there's an infrastructure help desk, which is tier 1 for operations. There's an application help desk, which is kind of like users calling and asking for stuff. And so you have an SR and an IR. And so they're different work streams, different people manage them. They kind of mean different things to the business. So we decided that if we're going to go down the custom cube route, we basically built 2 cubes, one for IRs, one for SRs. A couple of things we got as advantages that I don't think we were aware of at the time is we got to deliver the cubes faster because we had one guy work on IRs, one guy work on SRs, and there was a lot of reusability between them. And so the resources, we had this project, we did it in 3 months. So 2 BI devs and myself was overhead as the PM. So we had that for 3 months, and we were able to make all these changes and deploy the cube to Doug and his team. The other thing we did is split the ETLs into 2 groups, 2 jobs, basically. So we run the ETL jobs for IR once a day, usually at the end of the day, and that does all the processing for all the incident stuff. All the MP to IR ETLs was run at that time. All the historical data to grab the change logs and all that processing that runs once a day. And then the SRs, which are things that they measure, the business measures hourly. Like they wanted real-time data for SRs. So we weren't able to do that with the cube. It still has to process. But we separated the workloads on SQL, and so that job runs every hour, and it finishes in less than 5 minutes. So they get it sort of a real-time experience, near real-time. And then some of the things we would do later is, originally we used almost exclusively views. And so when Service Pack 1 comes out and they change the structure and the data, and all of a sudden I get enum stuff all over my reports. And of course, business users don't know what to do with that. So we have to go back in and change our views to map with the changes that Service Manager made. So when you run the cube, when you run the report and you see the fields, they all look like you expect. So if we had used more ETLs to transform some of that data, then as the Service Manager underlying data changed, it wouldn't have impacted our stuff. We also have more code to maintain. So it sort of depends on where you want to put your effort, I guess, at the end of the day. All right. All right, Doug.
Thanks, Christina. So we've been talking a lot about the Tier 1 help desk. What we built here actually applies to all the engineering teams. Not only the teams that we run, the monitoring team, so we have our own Tier 1 plus a Tier 2, Tier 3 monitoring team that runs our Operation Manager environment, deploys management packs, and makes sure that the infrastructure for operations managers is there and available for all of our business units like Microsoft.com, so it's always up and available monitoring their systems. The data that we're pulling in here actually has added benefit to all those teams as well. Anybody who gets a ticket, anybody who runs a server or a site, this data is useful to them. We measure it heavily at Tier 1 because that's where all the incident triage begins. But as we add the other business units, their properties, their data center locations into this data, we can get some very valuable data out of this. So when we first started with the cube, out-of-the-box cube that Christina showed you with those, I think, 3,000 dimensions in there, and they're all very cryptic. Everything was named the same. Everything was an incident this, incident that. But we didn't know what those really did. We had to go in there and run some reports and kind of reverse engineer what they've actually put in that first cube that shipped with Operations and Service Manager. As we deployed it, we were getting some useful data out there, volumes, trends. We can see where all the data was coming from. But it didn't give us a lot of the calculations we needed. And that's where Christina came in and built the new cube that actually we can define our calculations and not rely on the out-of-box cube and hope that whatever was in there was what mapped back to our business. We had some very stringent requirements when it comes to metrics, and we didn't quite know where all those were in the out-of-box cube. So when we started this a couple of years ago, it was very busy at Tier 1. The red line there is the total IRs. Every one of those IRs is an alert. Okay, this is you can see the July month, or even actually August, 52,000 alerts. 1 month, 52,000 alerts came through. And I've got a 40-person help desk team split into 2 teams, infrastructure and application sites. So about 20 people are managing 52,000 alerts a month. Out of those 52,000 alerts, the black line shows what is actionable. Remember we talked about that actionable, non-actionable. We want to know what's actionable. We don't want to call you at 2 in the morning just to say, just close the ticket. That costs a lot of money. It's also waking up engineers across the world. You can see 52,000 times a month. That's not very cost effective, no work-life balance, and it's not helpful for our Tier 1 help desk. I have to staff up to that level, right? So as we started coding these tickets as actionable, non-actionable, we can see there's this huge delta. This is a huge win between the red line and the black line. That's our target. Those are noisy management packs. That's cleanup opportunity. That's work-life balance if we can get that line down for the engineering teams. So as we deployed the first cube, and we started going into some testing because we kind of work in parallel with DevOps. So as they're deploying and dropping stuff to their test environment, I have my team constantly going out there, looking at the reports, testing the calculations, making sure that what they're working on is actually what we need to have delivered. So early on, we did start seeing some benefits from the out-of-box cube. It was a little challenging. It was very complicated. It took us months to actually get in there and try and reverse engineer it just to use the cube. Then we started working on our next version. We said, we're just going to start all over. We know what calculations we want. We understood the schema. We understood the database. We kind of had a feeling of where we wanted to go with our new cube. So we started taking the lessons learned from the out-of-box cube and started building the next version, which is the version we actually just recently shipped. We're also working on a cube version 3 right now, which is adding priorities. So we have P1s, P3s, P4s, and adding those calculations in for our service requests. So as we started deploying the first cube, we started going and tackling those management packs and looking at the non-actionable alerts and going back to the engineering teams with these actionable reports and helping them fine-tune their management packs. And that's one of the things that's very useful to a Tier 3 engineer. Those guys are always head down. They're very busy. I used to be a Tier 3 engineer around MSDN and TechNet for years. I don't have time to go dig through databases and take a look at reports and build my own reports and go crack open some management packs. I used to be one of those engineers that at 3 in the morning constantly getting called, just saying, just ignore it, leave me alone, I'll look at it tomorrow, right? As long as it wasn't site impacting, mind you. So as we started going through these reports, we started looking at all the data that's coming in from all the systems and realizing this is just a huge opportunity to go clean up some of this data. When we moved to Service Manager about 3 years ago, we were using another third party, and Service Manager came out. We wanted to be an early adopter of it. Our SLA wasn't very good. So we talked about our in SLA. So my commitment to Microsoft.com and MSDN and TechNet from my Tier 1 team, 24/7, we had a 33% in SLA escalation to those teams. It's terrible. I have an 80% goal. So knowing that I could either staff up to manage these 52,000 alerts, which means I would have to go ask for millions of dollars to go hire another whole team, or we can actually spend a little bit of money, build a dev team to go and build us a custom cube. So you can see that the sheer volume of alerts really had a dramatic impact to our SLA. Now the black line's relatively flat, 6,500 to maybe 7,000. Every once in a while it'll pop up to 7,400 alerts. Those are actionable. That's what the engineers want to hear from or see. Those are the escalations that they need because those are what's impacting their system, their SLA, their availability. So as we started going through this, we thought, well, maybe this black line is going to really just jump up dramatically, and somehow the engineers are really missing these actionable alerts. What we found was no, they were getting those alerts, but it was a needle in the haystack. So we're waking them up, for every actionable alert, 5 of them were non-actionable, and that's not a good work-life balance. So as we started driving down the total non-actionable alerts, our SLA started going up. We started measuring it right away. And it also had a financial impact as well. So when we had all these alerts in the system, it cost me about $135,000 a month to run my Tier 1 help desk. As we were going through the first version of the cube, I was able to staff back a little bit because we were actually addressing more alerts that were actionable and not dealing with all that frivolous extra noise. We're currently at about $118,000 a month. Now you may not think, it's a huge savings, 135 to 118, but if you look over the whole year, that's $200,000 just at Tier 1. We haven't even talked about measuring Tier 2 or Tier 3 or the end user business units like Microsoft.com. We support probably 300, 400 engineers around the world. And so if we start taking a look at the escalations that are going to those teams and you realize that we're sending them a lot of noise, that's impacting them. They're getting phone calls. They have to go close tickets. This is not a very good system at this sheer volume. So as we continue to drive down those non-actionable alerts, you can see that we're getting pretty close to parity. We're at 2 to 1. That's kind of where I think we should be. We have a lot of monitoring, so you may have a site issue that may be driven from a tempDB database somewhere that's filling up the log file so you can't write anymore. So you're getting multiple alerts. But the impact may say that your site availability is dropping. So we know that there's always going to be more than just one alert. It'd be nice to have one alert. We know that's the issue, and we can go right after it. But 2 to 1 is pretty good, considering we're at 5 to 1 a couple of years ago. We are continuing to build the next cube, the cube version 3, and we're hoping to actually get these costs down a little bit more. So not only are we escalating what's more actionable, we're actually fine-tuning the team. We're actually finding there's actually more opportunity within my Tier 1 team to go look at problem management, to go work with the engineers at Tier 2 and Tier 3 and help them look at the management packs and identify what work needs to be done. We don't want to put all this work on Tier 3. They have enough work to do. If we can provide reports and give them the direction that they need, which management pack needs to be adjusted or which rule needs to be adjusted in which management pack, that's very helpful to them. So I'm also hoping that within the next year that we're going to actually get this cost down a little bit more, maybe $110,000 a month. That's a $300,000 a year savings just at Tier 1. And I'm expecting it at the Tier 2, Tier 3 levels, we're probably looking at another $500,000 a year savings in just false escalations, not mis-escalations, but just over-escalating non-actionable issues. So how do you look at this data and say, what is my system doing? Do I need to expand my management pack group? Do I need to expand my monitoring systems? Do I need to build more capacity in a particular data center? What we can take a look at is pulling in some of the config manager data, because we've already got all the alerts coming from all the systems. We know which property, we know which engineer, which help desk, which team that they're going to. If we start pulling in some config manager data, which is what we're working on now, is how do we align that data with all the alerts coming in from the system? So by looking at, say, a particular SQL server that's over-alerting, we looked at one server earlier that had 2,000 alerts a month. Say that that had to do with capacity, not enough memory, CPU, it's maybe 90% high CPU. If we start aligning some of the config manager data from these systems, we can take a look and say, what is the cost of this system? Say maybe a physical server versus like using Azure or something like that, where you can just go ahead and expand in Azure to add more memory or CPU or compute cycles if you need to. So aligning this data with what we already have with Tier 1, we can actually take a look and see what systems need a little more work, need a little more attention. So this has been very helpful with our customers as well, because they can start taking a look as we start moving towards the cloud, take a look at how much are those old physical servers really costing, versus if you went out and took a look at Azure and, say, started moving those physical servers over to the cloud. So some of our core requirements, obviously, was to take a look at Service Manager, the service level agreements, the employee performance, problem management, as well as taking a look at Operations Manager and taking a look at which management packs were actually being very noisy. So the next step we're looking at, like I mentioned, config manager data. And once we start pulling in that data, we feel that we can have a complete picture of our complete monitoring system from Tier 1 to Tier 3 with our monitoring group, as well as Tier 2, Tier 3 for all the engineers outside the team that we still support. We may have built one cube for just my help desk, but we're quickly realizing that this cube is going to be used by every team at Microsoft. We have regular meetings with them. I have a problem management PM. That's all he does is sit here, go through these reports, customize an email, fires them off to the engineers, works with them to identify which management pack needs to be fine-tuned, works back with our monitoring team to make sure that that work gets done, and then we go back in here and measure it as well. So we covered quite a bit today. We covered, the defining metrics for Tier 1, as well as what to do with all this data. And one of the biggest wins, I have to say, of building up this cube is cleaning up management packs. If anybody in here has to deal with management packs and all the alerts coming from the system, this system definitely can help you guys clean up some management packs, provide some really good data back to your engineering teams on what work needs to be done in the environment to streamline these management packs, as well as how you can measure some of your business and aligning cost with all these tickets as well. Each one of these tickets, costs money to run. So as you drive those tickets down, you can improve your efficiency as well. And with that, we'd like to take some questions. If anybody would like to have questions, please step up to the microphones, and we'll be able to answer that for you. Yeah. Oh, please speak in the mic. I think you have to talk really loud into it.
No worries. So I noticed earlier on in the presentation you were using a separate data mart for the extract of There we go. Could you comment a little bit on the decision for the second data mart rather than just creating the prerequisite dimensions and facts in the Service Manager data mart itself and then the separate cube on the side?
I think we created it's just a database. We labeled it data mart, but it's just another database. And I think we decided that we wanted to keep our custom stuff separate from what came out of the box so that we would have better troubleshooting and just to have sort of some kind of separation of concerns. So instead of digging, mucking with what they provided, we just referenced the views in our stuff. So all our views in our database are just referential. And then we created tables that we needed for staging. And sometimes if we wanted the flexibility to add new tables, we would know what we did versus what they did. What we used to do when we combined them together is we used to label everything with like prefixes, MPSD, whatever, and then because there was so much stuff in there and we were trying to just solve a very concrete problem, we thought it would be easier to manage if we just took it outside and was able to see all the stuff we did. You could do it either way. I don't know that there was no real technical reason other than we thought it would be easier for us to manage. And then we knew kind of what we did and sort of what they were doing, right? And then when we want to troubleshoot and someone says, no, your cube is wrong or your data's wrong, it was easy to go back into the source data and say, well, let's see what they have, and we can do some comparisons for testing. But no real compelling reason, I don't think. Okay.
Thank you.
Are you sending all your operations manager alerts to service manager?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yep.
We have some custom tooling that we are able to route or email out of the system. So we define the alerts that we want to go to tier 1, but we allow the engineers to go into another tool that actually, if they want to route something, or if they knew they're doing some work on a particular system, instead of actually putting the server in, say, maintenance mode, which we can actually do automatically as well, or suppressing the server, we can actually just route all the alerts during that work window into a do not monitor queue, which we actually grum out every 3 days.
So there's some sort of correlation going on as well, so you don't get so many, is it all one-to-one? Every alert you get a ticket?
Every alert we'll get a ticket, yeah.
Every alert that is created in Operations Manager that doesn't use a different path, we have 2 paths, if you will, because we have an automated engine that before it gets to Service Manager will look at it and say, should this be routed to do not monitor, a separate queue, like we don't care about it. So we have 2 ways for them to handle the noise in the system. And so we built a sort of intermediary routing engine. So it gets created in OM, it gets sent to what we call NIM, and then it does some evaluation, and if it's not a do not monitor ticket, then it goes into Service Managers, 1-to-1. Everything that passes that gate is 1-to-1.
So you have some sort of automation engine then to watch out?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Question over here.
Check, test.
Yeah, is there any chance you'd make the data warehouse, the ETL, and the cube available for us in the public community?
Yeah, so we have plans to blog about it. I mean, I don't know that we would, we didn't do anything special, so it's all just straight SQL stuff. So we do have plans to publish it, make it available so people could go do it themselves. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I'm going to do that.
We'll do that after this.
Yep.
Hi. So how do we plan to groom this data, which we pull out in MP_SD_data mart?
How do we plan to groom the data out? And what was the
That's in the data mart or the actual database?
No, we pull the data from Operations Manager and Service Manager into SD_data mart.
Yep.
So how do we take care of the grooming in SD_data mart? And is there any documentation available?
So we don't groom any of it today. We store, right now we're going to store up to, the plan is to store 365 days worth of data. And we only bring over the 6 tables from OM. So right now it's not a disk space problem, right? So we have no grooming in the data mart, like in the data warehousing part where the cube is. In OM itself, I think they do 30 days of grooming. So the data goes away in the OM database after 30 days. But we don't groom today in the cube, in the data mart database that we created. Oh, we will. We haven't had it for a year yet. But after a year, we think we will only keep it for a year.
Could you talk about the rationale for sending your tickets to tier 1 as opposed to directly to the servers? I mean, are you getting first tier resolution, or is everything just being calm?
So we are getting first tier resolution. You can route some of the alerts directly to your queue. So there's actually some tier 2 teams that actually are set up like Microsoft.com. We do all the incident triage at tier 1 because we figure it's cheaper at tier 1. They have a 15-minute goal. We go back to the engineers at tier 2 and tier 3 with the problem management team and help them build the TSG. The goal is to try and get as much work done at tier 1 as possible.
TSG is troubleshooting guide.
Troubleshooting guide. Sorry. So the goal is that let's use our cheaper labor at tier 1. They're 24/7. They get in there and try and do some work or try and pull some data from the system. So when they do escalate to the engineers, they have a little more data. There are some engineers who like to, particularly when you deploy a new website, you want to kind of see what's going on, so you may over-monitor it early on. And we do have routing capabilities, so they can actually go to their own Service Manager queue and take a look at all that ticketing data. And if they determine that there's something that they want going through Tier 1, it's very easy for them to identify it and route it to my Tier 1 team.
So maybe I misinterpreted the graph because I was thinking about that wrong, but what do you have a goal or do you have a current performance level for first resolution on the OM?
40% is our goal. So 40% of the tickets that come to Tier 1 is our goal for them to go and remediate that. Early on, we were nowhere near that. You can see our in SLA escalations is at 33%. We are now right around 50% first touch resolution, and I'm thinking about actually increasing our first touch resolution goal for our Tier 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoyed MMS. And please fill out your surveys. Thank you.